Bank of America has just published a warning that, in my opinion, everyone should see. Bank of America is one of the 4 largest banks in the U.S., managing assets totaling over $3 trillion. Therefore, we need to pay attention to what they say. I will show you 2 key points that they just mentioned. These points are astonishing. They seem obvious, but very few people notice them, which is a mistake. The first important point from their warning is the chart of personal savings. This chart has a red line at the 5% level. The personal savings rate was below 5% right before the dot-com bubble for 23 months. In other words, we fell below this level and stayed there until the recession hit, and then we finally rose above it again. The next time we dropped below this level, we remained under it until another recession occurred. At the moment, over the past 30 years, we have observed this twice, from April 2000 to March 2001 and from January 2005 to December 2007. The third time we fell below this level was recently, in January of the 22nd year, and we have been below this level for 32 months. In other words, according to this chart from Bank of America, we could potentially face a recession over the next 3 months. Maybe this time it will be different. The second chart provided by Bank of America is titled Government Dominance in Wage Growth Does Not Contribute to Productivity Growth. Here we see 2 graphs. Dark blue represents changes in government wages, and light blue represents changes in private salaries. Both graphs show annual changes in the sectors of public and private administration, as well as healthcare, and we see that both graphs are currently reaching their peaks. It is easy to see that they always reach their peak just before the recession, which is indicated here by gray bars. If these 2 peaks coincide, then they are almost always followed by a recession. In fact, the only time this signal was not so clear and obvious was in the 71st year, but that was only because the peak of hiring in government was much lower. Thus, very often, after reaching these double peaks, a recession occurs on this chart. Again, it's possible that things will be different this time, but Bank of America notes that this chart indicates an approaching recession. Perhaps that is why Warren Buffett is engaged in sales, including shares of Bank of America. He recently sold almost $1 billion worth of shares, and as of July 20th, the total sales had already reached $7 billion. This is colossal, and all this is happening on the eve of the Federal Reserve's first interest rate cut on September 18th. What does Warren Buffett know? At first glance, another chart from Bank of America may seem incomprehensible, but the light blue chart reflects the financial, energy and commodity sectors. Dark blue is the sector of technology, telecommunications and healthcare. Currently, there are terms similar to thou during the dot-com bubble, with a share of technologists, telecommunicating, and knitting China in global and stocky reaching a record zipper kotasi of interest. What did the market look like before the recession in the early 2000s? We had a bubble in technology, telecommunications and healthcare, and the peak of this bubble was 44% of the total volume of global stocks. In 2008, we saw a slightly different picture, but the peak was also 44%. At that time, financial companies, energy and raw materials companies accounted for, as you might guess, 44% of the total volume of global stocks. So, where are we today, in 2024? Technology, telecommunications and healthcare are at their peak, accounting for 44%. But is this just a coincidence? On the other side below, we see that financial companies, energy, and commodities accounted for 24% of the total global stock volume. Now this figure stands at 25%. Look closely at this, it's something you couldn't make up. This is one of the most astonishing charts I have ever seen. I literally get chills thinking that we live in a time that has only occurred twice in the last 30 years. Incredible, but people do not pay attention to this. They remain focused on labor market data, with everyone saying that rising unemployment will signal an impending recession. But look at this. We can clearly see that unemployment does not start to rise sharply, at least until a recession has already progressed a third of the way through its cycle. In other words, we could find ourselves in a situation where a recession is in full swing, yet the unemployment rate is still not rising. This indicator lags significantly behind the onset of a recession and therefore cannot precede it. Another thing everyone is currently praying for is deflation. Inflation has exhausted everyone, and everyone wants deflation. However, I think that when people talk about deflation as something good for consumers because prices are falling, they forget that it is terrible for companies. Suddenly, these companies have to lay off employees, and then even more employees. Let me give you an example. Suppose you sold 100 bottles of lemonade this year and then 110 bottles next year. You think, great, I sold 10% more this year than last year. But think about this, last year you sold lemonade for 100 cents a bottle, and this year you will have to sell it for 85 cents. Your revenue last year was $100. Now, with deflation and considering that sales increased by 10%, your revenue would be $93.50. In other words, deflation means a decrease in earnings per share and a decline in revenue. Even with sales growth, this is a problem. For example, Goldman Sachs has just announced layoffs of 3 to 4% of its staff. This is difficult even for banks, considering that due to rising interest rates, they are also sitting on unrealized losses of $500 billion. Usually, companies quickly adapt to changes by slowing down firing, but during a recession, they are forced to lay off employees en masse and quickly, otherwise they risk bankruptcy. This is why unemployment tends to start rising in the midst of a recession rather than before it. Thus, Bank of America was that a recession may occur within the next 3 months. Billionaires like Warren Buffett are already selling billions of dollars in stocks in anticipation of the first interest rate cut by the Federal Reserve in September 2024. On our Telegram channel, you will find the main news, an overview of the crypto markets. We regularly monitor coins that can give big excess. Welcome. See you soon, friends.